it's time to start taking inventory of all the evidence that's in front of us and start making conclusions. So let's take a walk down the timeline. During this election cycle, what did we see coming out of the Republican Party and, in particular, Donald Trump? We saw an entire campaign that during its closing message, they called it the 90 Days of Rage. And what were the references that they pulled from in this 90 Days of Rage to motivate their base to come out and vote for them? The entire campaign had been built using overt and covert callbacks to the 1933 German elections where Hitler came to power. And the Trump campaign ran an almost exclusive campaign where they visited just about every sundown town possible, spreading the same message that they had spread for the last 24 months. And that message was even more focused on immigrants poisoning the blood of the country. You had all sorts of conspiracy theories designed to animate the racist white Republican base into coming out in force and also suppressing anybody that might be challenging them at the ballot box. So you had an entire campaign that ran like that. And then you saw the Madison Square Garden event, which was a direct callback to one of the rallies that happened in New York before World War II kicked off. That was an effort of the American Nazi Party to build a stronghold in the US. And the Trump campaign used that as their closing message before heading to the polls. Now, once the election was over, what have we seen? We've seen the top surrogate of the Trump administration, Elon Musk, do what during the inauguration? He gave a salute that everybody recognized, and everybody that was on the Republican side and MAGA played it off as if it was no big deal. You've seen people throughout the administration that have deep ties to far right and white nationalist organizations. You have Kash Patel, who's an election denier. You have Pete Hegseth, who is a white nationalist, and he's got tattoos all over himself that calls out and dog whistles to that audience. And you have Elon Musk repeatedly giving a platform to far right fringe candidates and far right ideologies on his Kremlin bot infested disinformation swamp of a social media platform. And that's just over the first handful of weeks. What have we seen in the last week or so? What we've seen is an escalation of the callbacks to the Führer that Trump and his administration seems to be aligning themselves tightly with. When you think about the fundamental pillars of fascism, and particularly the German version of fascism, it's characterized by three big elements. One is nationalism, two is militarism, and three is expansionism. And what have we seen? The entire campaign was built around nationalism. We already knew that. Then we've seen the militarism get ramped up recently with the call for purges and the implementation of loyalists within the administration and threats both near and far on invasion to various allies of ours. And the third part ties in with the second part where you're talking about expansionism as well. And that's all wrapped around this cooked up concept funded by the Heritage Foundation about traditional values as a centerpiece of the administration. In addition to traditional values, who should be at the top of this new order that they're seeking to put into place? And it's deeply tied into racialism, and the demographic that they are going after are obviously white Christian males. So that's all prelude to what we might be looking at into the future. And if that wasn't enough, here's what's happened in just the last handful of days. You've had Donald Trump make a direct call out using phraseology that was very similar to what Hitler used by saying, "He who saves the country does not violate the law." If that doesn't indicate to you that we are dealing with somebody that is going faster and faster into authoritarianism and fascism, I don't know what will. Hitler made a similar quote during his administration: "The authority of the Führer is not limited by laws or statutes." And how have we seen this administration respond to the judicial and occasional legislative roadblocks that have been put in front of them? They're completely ignoring that. And you pair that along with another eugenicist being implemented in the State Department, and you have a vaccine denying eugenicist heading the Department of Health and the NIH. And you have Elon Musk actively accepting money from Holocaust deniers and Nazi sympathizers on his platform. That sets a pretty stark picture of what we're dealing with, doesn't it? But wait, there's more. If all of that didn't convince you that we are dealing with what is a growing effort to bring forward the Fourth Reich, here's what just happened in Germany. J.D. Vance went to Germany and is unofficially campaigning for the AfD. And the AfD is a political party that draws a direct line to Hitler's Nazi party, and they are actively campaigning on an anti-immigrant platform, on a racial purity platform, on an isolationist platform, everything that you could think of that was the hallmark of the 1933 Nazis, AfD is running on. And J.D. Vance recommended to the German people and all of Europe that AfD is the model that the rest of Europe should take and that Germany should take. This is a call to arms for every white nationalist fringe group across the world to mobilize and take over their systems of government to bring in that Fourth Reich. We could chalk up any one of these things as a one-off or an overreaction, but there is a clear pattern of behavior that's been developed over the last several years coming out of the Republican Party. And this has been amplified by Kremlin interests and to a lesser degree, Chinese interests, and you're seeing it all across the globe. I've talked about before how the fingerprints of the Kremlin are all across Europe. When you look at Ukrainian politics, you have issues there. Georgian politics, you have Kremlin fingerprints there. Moldova, you have Kremlin fingerprints. Romania, Poland, France, and Brexit. These were all things that were engineered by the Kremlin's efforts to deploy active measures and destabilize their adversaries and consolidate the former Soviet states back under the Russian umbrella. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news. Their indirect and asymmetrical warfare efforts using bot farms and election influence and paying off allies to their cause, feeding right through conservative circles across the European and international landscape, it's winning. We are looking at the dawning of potentially a tripolar world. And the new world order that these folks are looking to bring in consists of a combination of Russia and China ruling in the East and an increasingly expansionist US exerting its imperial roots across this hemisphere. You've already seen it in the language that's being used against Canada, Mexico, Greenland, and Panama, and that's going to continue to escalate. What it's going to require to head this off, because if we don't avoid this, if we keep going on this trajectory, there's going to be a death toll in the millions across the world as a result of this. It's going to require every citizen to mobilize and understand what's going on and realize sooner than later that all of their promises of a better world, it's not for you. When you look at what the Trump vision for a great America looks like, they're doing callbacks right back to the Gilded Age. And that was a period in American history that was very dark. It was a period in American history where you had a massive separation between the elites and the working class, to the point where during the Gilded Age, according to some estimates, the US population, 90% of the US population was living below the poverty rate. And that is what they think is when America was great. And you can understand why the billionaires are all lining up and bending the knee, because during that era, during the industrial revolution, what happened? All the billionaires got together and did what they could to maximize their assets to the expense of everybody else. So this is where we need to understand history on a couple of different eras and recognize that the vision for the New World Order does not include 99% of us average Joes all across the world. We're talking about constructing a world that benefits the 0.0002%, and everybody else is just fodder. So this is when we need to understand what the stakes are and understand that sitting down and just taking it and hoping that it ignores you is not a winning strategy. The Republican Party and all of the billionaire backers of Donald Trump have gone full Nazi. The pattern is clear. The callbacks are clear. And if you're a student of history, you know where this is going on a number of different fronts. And the sooner we call it out and take action, the better off we're going to be.